Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to another educational session of Money Talks
with the Wealth Whisperer.
Excellent. All right. Today, very exciting. Topic was brought to me by Evan Kemp. Evan had worked at my wealth advisory firm for over a year now, and he brought something up that has been really hard. So I think it will be extremely helpful if we're mindful and put some thought to how to best help that person who's straight out of college or even still in college and just wondering, you know what, I'm going to have these responsibilities and I maybe have some fear or concern thereof. Tell me a little about it, how you came about coming up with the topic, because it's absolutely something I've dealt with. I deal with multiple times a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is your 20s feels daunting if everything financially. You're trying to build a career, you're trying to set yourself up in the future. And honestly, you don't know everything in your 20s. So if we did, we wouldn't be asking these questions. But I think these are very important questions that we ask in our 20s, and that these are things that we would love to have answered.
Yeah, so in essence, we named this podcast, I'm a Young Adult, Now What? And so that's really what it comes from. At what point in your life did you start having concerns or start worrying about, all right, anything and everything that I buy or have to pay for is now my responsibility?
I think the minute that mom and dad are not paying for everything anymore, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's probably the easiest answer, right? But I mean, the minute you step out of school, it's go time. I mean, you're on the ground with 2 feet running.
Okay. So for all of you out there in podcast land today, hopefully this is very educational and useful. And we look forward to setting that groundwork that allows you to take the ball and start moving it forward.
All right. So it looks like our first question today is coming from Katie. Kate, what's on the top of your mind?
Hi, Rob. I have a question. How do I build credit?
Wow. That's a great question. Bob, if you don't mind, I'm actually going to take this question. That's okay with you?
Works for me.
All right. Perfect. So there's kind of 2 different ways here that you can build credit. You're either living on your own or you're living with mom and dad, right? Whether that's you living actually with mom and dad or you're at a dorm, but those would be our 2.
Mom and covering
Covering the expenses, right? So first way we're going to talk about is when you're living with mom and dad, right? So if you're living at home, mom and dad cover expenses, right? You're going to want to go and get a credit card with your mom or dad.
2 ways you can do that, right?
Yes.
All right. So say, for example, the young adult is the lead. What does that look like?
Yes. So if you go to get this credit card, you're going to need either parent as a primary on the credit card to help back you in case you were not to pay the credit card.
Okay.
Right. So
Say primary, you mean you're the primary.
You're the primary, but they're, I don't know what the technical term is, but they're there in case.
It could be a cosigner.
Yes, the
authorized user.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they're the authorized user on there. In case you weren't to pay, they would pay because they are the authorized user of the cosigner.
Okay. So by doing it that way, every time that you're making a payment, you're getting credit. You are towards your credit.
Correct.
Okay.
You're building credit. Right?
Got it. All right. So I'll take the other side. What I've done in the past, and I'll be honest with all you out there, you're willing to do this if you trust your parents. Okay.
Yes.
Because in essence, what I did is I have added my child in the past as an authorized user on my credit card. Did they have a card? No. Did they have access to buy anything with it? No. But very simply, what I knew is I was going to be making a multitude of purchases and I was going to pay off that credit card on time every single time. So everything that I was doing was helping my kid build their credit. So you mentioned the other way though. So since we've covered the mom and dad so you really have no access to credit yourself. What ways do kids have access to credit besides pulling the old cosigner thing or authorized user thing?
Yeah, so you're talking about like if you're living alone.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So actually, each and every month when you're paying your rent, your energy, your water bill, you're actually building credit each and every month from paying off your monthly bills.
Yeah. Right. So there could be a multitude of ways, but those are the primary ways. And I think if you just stay focused there, you're going to see your credit build pretty quickly. Next question we have coming from a client's son, Charlie. Charlie, what do you got for us?
Hi, Rob. I have a question. As a college student with a limited budget who started investing in a retirement fund, how can I make the most of my small contributions to diversify other investments?
Charlie, I am so thankful for that question. The reason I'm so thankful for that question is it was very hard as I got older and dealing with people who were more age similar to myself to all of a sudden having discussions with kids who are 22, 25, 28 years old and putting myself in their shoes. And what I do look back and reflect on, which is extremely helpful, is there's two ways that you need to diversify. Okay. The first is that I had to, by reflecting back, realize that a lot of lay people don't know how to ask questions because not really sure what they're trying to get to. Okay. And so the first thing that I say whenever when I'm meeting with a younger individual is that you need to first understand what a registration is. And in essence, the younger you are, probably the more likely you're going to need to diversify amongst registrations. What I mean by that, so those of you like, okay, where are you going with this? I am a lay person, is that an IRA is not an investment. Okay. A 401k is not an investment. It is a registration. A savings account is an investment. Yep. People think of it, though, as a registration. And what I simply mean by that is a savings account can be an IRA, actually. A lot of people don't realize that. So, right, that's what I want to go first, is as a younger individual, it is very likely that you're going to have to diversify amongst registrations, meaning that you're going to target, and I'll talk about that, I'm sure, multiple times, maybe even today's podcast, is per goal. I need to have an appropriate registration. So if I need money in the next 6 months, 3 years, 10 years, I'm going to need to have a liquid registration. So whether it's a brokerage account or a bank account, something that I can easily move money in and out. An IRA, Roth IRA, different purposes for such. Okay, that's step one. Understand what is the obligation I'm trying to save towards and what is the appropriate registration that it needs to be in so I can access that money when I may need to access it. Now, to get specific to Charlie's question, how do I go about diversifying with limited resources? There's a best way, and then there's a little bit more detailed way. The best way, I'll take you back 25 years ago. 25 years ago, there was something called the internet bubble implosion. What ultimately happened to way too many people, especially within their 401k plans, is that they had gotten very concentrated. Throughout the 1990s, technology drove the markets. So what happened more so then than any time since, because it also happened a lot of times in the past too, but it hasn't happened as much since, is you got a lot of people chasing the market, meaning that they were chasing the things that had done well. And so the things that had done well at the end of the 90s were the things that unfortunately dropped on average 80%. The technology ETF dropped 80% from March of 2000 until a few years later. Wow. And so if you were in your 401k and you had 50 to 75% of your money in funds that either told you they were in technology or didn't tell you they were in technology, but they were concentrated in technology, right? So what happened 25 years ago is the industry did something, maybe the best thing they've done in 30 plus years, is they developed this concept of what was known as a target retirement fund. It's what I'll call a one-stop shopping fund. You put all your money into a particular fund and you move on with your day. Okay? So to Charlie's question, you could use these for intermediate goals and certainly for long-term goals. So most any person that comes for me with help with limited resources, almost 100% of the time, will dedicate a majority, if not all, of their investment money to a target retirement fund. Target retirement fund invests as such. It's initially constructed by an actuary that simply sits there and says, based upon how long that you have to invest your money, this is how much you should be in stocks and bonds. And then it goes over to the investment company so say Fidelity uses their actuaries, then they have their investment managers. The investment managers then may put 10,000 different investments within that target retirement fund that's covering thousands of U.S. stocks, thousands of international stocks, thousands of bonds, etc. And so that is by far the easiest way with limited resources. And because the scale of the industry today, you could do it with reasonably small amounts of dollars. Great question, Charles, once again. Evan, who's got the next question?
All right. Looks like our next question here is coming from Victor. Victor, what are you thinking about?
Hey, Rob. Hope you're doing well. I have a couple questions for you. The first is, how much money should I have set aside for an emergency fund?
Okay. Rob, do you want to take this one?
Happily. All right. Emergency fund. Okay. If you're just starting out, and besides needing an emergency fund, you're looking to save money for a down payment on a home, which we've already talked about today. I think sometimes those can be brought together. If you have limited other access to liquidity, that's how you're going to think about an emergency fund. Okay. Some people may have some other access to liquidity in the name of mom or dad. But if the answer was no, if something happens, it's on me.
Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. In that instance, once again, we'll go to a rule of thumb. And I'm totally okay with it. I think getting 2 and then having 6 months of your income available, for the most part, hopefully relatively risk-free, that should put you in a pretty good place. The risk you would take in such an account, once again, I was just noting, probably I would suggest the high-yield savings account. Okay. Some people may be willing to take a little bit of a risk. In that particular instance, if you used a target retirement fund that, had a year that passed a long time ago. Okay. I wouldn't think for money that you're going to use in the immediate term that you want to be taking much risk. Ultimately, hopefully we're just giving you guys information and providing education that would allow you to come to the appropriate decision as to, and that's why I'm focusing really today on just 2 categories of investments, because a majority of the money that I'm going to invest as a young kid is going to be short term, shouldn't be taking a lot of risk, high yield savings account, or I'm in my 20s and I'm opening a Roth account or I'm putting money into a 401k. And honestly, when you don't have a lot of money, you got to get diversified. That's what the long-term target retirement funds will do for you. So as it pertains to an emergency fund, it's 2 parts. One, how much of an emergency would it really be if something were to occur? If what happened to me, I don't know how much it happens anymore, but I'm driving the 80s and my Blazer throws a rod. So now all of a sudden I have to replace an engine, which is probably worth every bit of my car as well. Okay? In that particular instance, what am I going to do? Where am I coming up with $4,000 to either one, fix this thing or get something that I can drive around? If the answer is I have limited outlets, then that's where you need that emergency fund and you need to make sure that you're building it up. I'll give you guys all a little bit of insight. There's a multitude of ways of having liquidity, though, as you get older. Most of you, I'm going to highly encourage that as you start doing retirement savings, you're going to have not only things that are embedded within retirement accounts like Roths or 401ks, but you'll be doing after-tax accounts. Okay. There's a word that some of you may have heard of called margin. Whether it's through margin or what's known as non-purpose loans, you could actually say here we are 10 years in the future, you have $100,000 in a brokerage account. That, believe it or not, is providing liquidity. Let's take another example. Let's say it's 10 years from now, you own a home. That home's worth $300,000, and you have $80,000 of equity in the home, meaning that you only owe $220,000 on a $300,000 home. There's something known as an equity line, magnificent way to access liquidity or credit. But in terms of where you all are at this point in time, a majority who are thinking through this and going, I'm just starting out, we got to build that emergency fund. That emergency fund comes down to one, setting the money aside, and two, making sure I'm not taking any more risk than I should be with an emergency fund. But as noted at the very beginning on this question, is in most instances, that account is going to be two parts. It's probably going to be in a bank or a brokerage house, and it's going to be a high yield in your savings account, and it's going to be some other investment, and it's going to be for down payment on a home and an emergency fund all together. It could be separate, or I certainly could see it done within one.
All right. Looks like Victor, you got another question for us?
Okay, Victor, you go ahead.
And two, if I wanted to start an investment account, what would be the strategy and how much money would I need to start it off? Thanks and have a great day.
Very nice. Ron, I think this might be more of your wheelhouse here.
Got it. All right. Yes, because I probably could tell a little backstory along with it. I think we've already answered a lot about the strategy side.
Yes.
But in terms of minimum, that's a real question. When I started in this industry 30 plus years ago, it was the reverse. You would think it would have been easier in smaller amounts, but from a scale standpoint, it was very difficult, and I think rightfully so, for investment firms to be willing to accept low minimums. So I worked at Fidelity 30 years ago. I know Vanguard today has even a higher minimum than we had then, but the minimums were like $2,500 or $3,000, and if you didn't have that, I guess I have a couple of backstory. One backstory I can tell was before I went in and opened that account that I talked about earlier in the podcast, my dad had set up a phone call between myself and someone that was working in his bank. And when they found out that I had $1,000, let me just tell you that conversation ended pretty quickly. But today, I can tell you that whether it's a mutual fund side, I know there are mutual fund companies that have no minimums. That literally, so if you went and Googled, so without me promoting any other institution, mutual fund companies with no minimums, you're going to find somebody. And there are a multitude of brokerage companies that will actually, allow you. Yeah, it's very difficult, and I think on the brokerage side is them willing to assume a loss on the front end for the hope that you grow it with. You stay with them over time. And so on a mutual fund, it's pretty simplistic. The companies that I'm thinking of are no-load companies, so you're not going to need a broker or have to pay a sales charge. And so some of these companies are really low expenses. So I'm getting all the advantages of scale without having a scalable amount of money. I think that's what Victor's question is all right, am I going to be taken to the cleaners because I don't have a lot of money? Yeah. Because in the old world, the answer, absolutely. If you don't have a lot of money, you're going to be taken to the cleaners because no one else is going to be willing to talk to you, whether it happened to be a mutual fund company or a brokerage house. On the brokerage side, Evan, as you're probably aware, things have changed dramatically in the past 10 years because now you have stock trading for free at many institutions.
Almost all of them, right?
Yep. And you could literally open an account and buy a share. So I could literally have very, very little money, maybe less than $50. I can go in, I can open an account, I could buy a share, and I could be buying a share of a diversified ETF. Could it be a target retirement type ETF? And so little money cost me nothing.
Sounds pretty good.
Yep. So, that's some of the steps that you can look into in terms of there are very low to no minimums, and you could do it in a very inexpensive manner. So I hope that helps you, Victor. Last question I think we have time for today is coming from Colin. Colin, what do you got for us?
Hey, Rob. I do have a question coming at you here. I've got some money saved up, but I don't really think it's enough to, in my opinion, warrant for a financial advisor. I feel like I can invest in myself, and as more money accrues, maybe I'll look into a financial advisor. I'd be curious as to what insights you have in that regard.
Yeah. I'll take that, Liz. All right, Rob?
That's fine. All right. I think it's a really good question.
Hopefully, if you're a young person and you're speaking to someone that's also young, maybe you're doing them a favor. They asked you to come in And, there may be, hopefully, they're doing a good job and maybe give you some knowledge that you didn't have coming into it. You can actually maybe apply some of these things.
In many instances, your situation is true, may not be that complex.
Which could happen, of course. But if your situation is complex.
But if we take a step back to that, what if it isn't? What could you give us an example of a situation that maybe isn't that complex and maybe doesn't require an advisor?
Yeah, for example, let's say you got a 401k at work and that's all you have, right? And you're not touching that money for 30, 35 years, maybe 40 years, right? You may not need a financial advisor. You might just be able to hopefully invest in some 2060 fund or 2065 fund and just set it and forget it and just keep.
It's already aging me, so now that 2065 funds, they are out there. Okay. Unfortunately for me, I don't invest in 2065 funds anymore. A little too old for that.
All right. Now, the next part of where you may want to speak to a financial advisor is that's where you may want to, like some of our clients have, is they reach out to their parents,
Your situation warrants.
Yeah, because your situation.
As we talked about today, you may have a multitude of different goals you're trying to, and I may even throw out financial planning. So there's two parts. There's investment planning and financial planning. A lot of what we talked about today, I put into investment planning. Financial planning then gets a little bit more broad, and that's when you may or may not feel the situation is more complex, but there's someone in your world that relies upon you. And that's where I sort of say that financial planning becomes a necessity. Yep. So if that falls on, what are your thoughts on how they can go about and try to figure out, okay, Rod, one, not only do I need one, but will one even talk to me?
Yeah, exactly. If your parents had worked, I think this is where I was going with it, is like if your parents are working with a financial advisor, someone that they like, someone that they think does a great job, I think getting that name would be very core. I think Rob touched on it, is a number of times he's sat down with, clients' kids just to help show the basics and what they should be doing. I think a financial advisor should be doing that for your family.
Yes, I was say it. As in our instance, if they're not willing to talk to you and spend as much time with you as they would spend with your parents, then they sort of have some ethical issues, because every time a client has ever asked for us to speak with their children, every time I've given that person as much time as I would have given the parents.
Yep. And the other route we were thinking is, what makes the most sense is probably going to be, look at your circle. Is there people around you that you deem that are successful, maybe financially successful? Are they working with someone? This industry is a lot of referrals, word of mouth, right? It might make sense. You might think, oh, I'll just Google it. That's not how this works exactly. You got to, people that are they working with anyone? And that's kind of where we thought you could also, dig and see if someone else is using a financial advisor.
So if I can leave you all with today, here's the different components that you may be running into in the short or intermediate future. One is cash flow planning. Cash flow planning, I think a majority, if not everyone who's watching this podcast today, is probably capable of doing cash flow planning. Cash flow planning starts with, how much do I make? How much are my wants and needs? What are the difference between the two? And then the one difficult part of cash flow planning that may require some insight is, not only do I define who's competing for those savings dollars between emergency funds and, and retirement savings, etc., but which one deserves a larger percentage of each? That's the cash flow planning. We touched upon it earlier. Next, which is then going to be goal planning, which we talked about also. Okay, how much am I going to need? How much am I required to pay down my college loan versus how much should I be? Say, hypothetically, you got a college loan at 8%. In my opinion, you have a college loan at 8%, and you have the ability of setting aside 28% of what you make in the form of an income. That loan should probably be getting more than the minimum pay, if you know what I mean. Okay? Then from there, you're going to start to running into things like what we'll call planning. One component of planning is if you're getting married, have a child, or are going to have a child, you need a will. Until then, I'll be honest, I don't see much of a need for what the things that I would call organizational planning. Yeah, wills, power of attorneys, trust, those types of things. You don't need to know that much about those words anytime soon. Okay? But the will would be the first one that you would ever use, because a will is used to dictate if you have an obligation to a child and you are no longer there to fill that obligation, who are you designating to fill that obligation in your place? Next would be insurance planning. Up until 25 or 26 years old, I don't know the exact age, was it 26, 28? So, yeah, all right. So from a health insurance standpoint, that's probably your primary concern of the individuals who are watching our podcast today. But if you are put out there on your own and you have to decide upon health insurance, that is absolutely planning. Financial planners often will not be versed in that. So if you are working for a company that is offering it to you, here are your outlets. The company that's working for you will have somebody you can speak with to help you pick the right plan. They may not even tell you that they do, but they do. Okay? If you are thrown onto Obamacare due to your situation that you don't have an employer that offers it, there is going to be somebody that you'll be able to connect with through the government. And was it healthcare.gov? I think so. Yep, healthcare.gov will have a phone number within it. And certainly my staff has called a number of times to help clients out with clients and gotten a tremendous amount of help from those individuals. Yes. So healthcare is incredibly important. Those are your outlets. Then you can start looking at things like, life insurance or maybe even disability. Hopefully you're working at a company where disability is covered there, because that's the best place to get disability, would be through a group plan. But life insurance is one of the first things that comes from a planning standpoint. Once again, once you have other people that are relying upon, you financially. So as we move on that, we have tax planning. Tax planning early on is going to be one of the most important things that you're going to do. And I'm just going to drop one piece of knowledge, as the question didn't come up today, is, hey, I started working at a company and they had a 401k. And it's asking me this question: do I want to do pre-tax or do I want to do this thing called a Roth 401k? Which one do I want to do? Here's how it works. Everything that you need to know to decide whether you should be making pre-tax or post-tax contributions through a Roth is going to be dictated on what tax bracket you're in today versus what tax bracket you're going to be in the future. Very few of you are in the highest tax bracket that you will ever be in. Okay? So it's rare that it's going to be a given that you do pre-tax. So take someone at my age group. A lot of people in my age group are making more money than we've ever made. We may or may not have been able to do all the savings that we could to this point, but hopefully we're making a lot more money than we've made before, and it's putting us into a much higher tax bracket than we'll ever be. Most people will then drop tax brackets dramatically when they retire. So in that instance, people my age, a lot of time, you're putting most, if not everything, in the pre-tax. Because I could be in a 32, 35, or 37% bracket, and maybe I could get myself 22 or 12% bracket in retirement. In that instance, I'm avoiding paying taxes at 32 to 37. And I'm going to withdraw the money at 12 to 22. In that particular instance, I'm significantly financially better off. Now let's take a young adult in their 20s. And let's say I'm not married and I'm making $50,000. $50,000, I get a standard deduction of maybe 13 or 14, and I'm not sure exactly what the standard deduction would be, but I promise you I'm not very far off. If I'm making 50, then my taxable income is only 37,000. I may be in a 12% tax bracket. If I'm in a 12% tax bracket and I expect to be much more successful in the future, and I may be in a 22, 24, 32, or maybe the government eventually wakes up one day and starts changing the tax brackets because they need to start filling this massive gap known as the debt load that we have today. So brackets could be higher. So for many of you, a Roth is something that you're going to deeply want to consider. If you're working in a company without a match, you may want to do a Roth IRA rather than doing a Roth 401ks. If you have a match, in that particular instance, if you're in a 12% bracket or maybe even a 22% bracket, you may want to be doing a Roth when you're younger in age. All right?
Hopefully, as we said a couple of times, we dropped some knowledge on you today. Anything we can do, what we're going to do is at the end, we'll leave some contact information for us. We greatly appreciate you spending some time with us today. Thanks to you, Evan, too.
Of course. Thanks for having me out.
For all podcast or guest-related questions, please email us at dlacadvisors@dlacadvisors.com. For all questions or inquiries into the services that are provided by DLAC Wealth Advisors, please contact us at elliot.singer@dlacadvisors.com. That's Elliot with 2 T's. Please also visit our description for helpful links.